Hello, Hannah the Suburban Witch here, and today we're talking reincarnation. Now, I've been wanting to chat about this topic in greater detail for a little while, just because it's so interesting and so intriguing, and it gets a lot of interest from a lot of different people. So basically, I have 5 different key elements that you can sort of keep an eye out for that could potentially tell you if your soul has been reincarnated. There is such thing as new souls, so people who haven't yet had an incarnation here on this plane. And there are people who have had, hundreds of lives. So most souls will need at least 100 incarnations generally before they sort of ascend. But majority of people, you and I, have probably only had about 10 or 12. And we usually don't remember any of them. Now, the key times that people will remember these is through dreams and also when they're a child. Before the age of 4, generally, sometimes even up to the age of 7, children can have recollections and memories from a previous life, some more than others. And there's been a lot of case studies and investigation and research done by a few key people that have, got details on these children where they've been able to validate their lives beforehand. So it's really, really interesting stuff. Now, what is reincarnation? Reincarnation is basically talking not about your body, not your physical body, but your soul, so the part of you that makes you you, and that it doesn't die when our physical body dies. So instead of going to a hell or a heaven or a purgatory or limbo, what this soul does is choose whether to stay in the spiritual plane or to reincarnate. I believe that the soul does have a choice when they come back. Some may choose to stay in the spiritual plane for a little bit longer. There can be lessons learned on that side as well, or they may choose to guide another relative down on the physical plane. So that is a possibility. And we do have soul groups as well. So soul groups are so interesting. I probably need to do a whole thing on soul groups. Soul groups are basically the idea that there are key people in your life that you always reincarnate with. Not always at the same timing in terms of ages. For example, my daughter may have been my mother in a past life, for example. And I do have that inkling. I'm not 100% on that, but she did crawl into bed the other day. She's 2, put her arms around me in a very parental way, like she was hugging me. She had my head on her chest and she said, "I'll never lose you again." That's a bit weird, right? From a 2-year-old. Anyway, so aside from that, I believe that we do have sort of almost like clusters, and even if we're not born into the same families, we might be born into different roles. So if you have someone who's almost like a teaching position, as a friend who's teaching you stuff all the time, or a actual teacher who's teaching you things, they could have been, parental teachers in a previous life or that sort of thing. And we almost have like contracts with people as well. This is not even going into reincarnation. This is just the afterlife. Okay, I might just call this the afterlife and reincarnation chat. So, you can have these people that you say, okay, well, last time I learned this about myself, but now my soul needs to learn a bit more about, how I deal with, being a victim, or how I deal with, being a perpetrator, and where those dark parts of my soul are. And, you might have people that you almost like sign a contract with that when you reincarnate, you work through those lessons together. So that's really interesting stuff to think about and, go through your life as well, because then you can see things that may be, more difficult to go through. So tough times in your life as a lesson rather than, being in the victim role all the time. So a little bit there. Now let's get into some of these common things that can come up, especially with children. And a lot of this information is taken from things like the works that Dr. Brian Weiss has done on this topic, and Ian Stevenson, and some of the things that they bring out when they're studying the children that have validated past life experiences, and as well as from past life regressions that have happened and been recorded. So that's where that's all been compiled from. Now the first thing is generally a pull to a certain culture or a certain place or country. So especially so if you've had more than one life in this area. So for example, I have this inexplicable pull to Louisiana, of all places in the world. I'm from Melbourne, Australia. Louisiana doesn't really come up in our culture or anything that we watch. There's a couple of things on, a couple of movies, you know, Gone with the Wind, that sort of stuff. Not that that's Louisiana, but Southern style things. But there's not a lot, so it's not something I was inundated with as a child. But I've always been fascinated by Louisiana. Can't explain it. And I ended up seeking this out in media, pop culture, books, that sort of thing, until I actually moved there and went and worked there for a little bit as well. And when I stepped foot on that soil, it felt like I was coming home. It was this really bizarre feeling, like I breathed the air and went, ah, and I'm even getting chills now. I've got goosebumps because it was such a surreal experience to feel like I'd been there before. I've since had a psychic who did tell me that I had 2 lives in Louisiana, and this was without her knowledge of my feelings with that place. So 2 lives there, it sort of like doubles up that energy. You could have also just had a really great time in that place. So if you've had a particularly good life, you might be drawn back to that area where that good life was. Like your soul remembers, you know, even though we don't consciously have all these memories here, they are still in our soul. We can remember them if we know the way, if we can get ourselves into that deep trance meditative state to remember those. So your soul does remember those little things. It gives you little clues. So a real fascination with a place or a country or like a vibe can be a key pointer. Now then we've also got a time fascination. So if you are obsessed with the 60s or obsessed with the 1800s, or, you know, even further back, obsessed with, you know, some of the ancient cultures, or the 1600s. Like, there's so many time periods that we've been through. And one question I get asked a lot, what if you're obsessed with a future time period? Now, I'm going to go way off on it doesn't matter. This is my video. I can go off wherever. So, there is a theory, and it's thrown about a lot in the metaphysical community, and I think a little bit in quantum physics about time. So time is not linear. It's not the way we are brought up and taught for it to be. I mean, calendars are just a human concept, right? So time, if you imagine it like and this is actually in the biblical community too, I should state. Theologically, this is sound. So if you imagine all of time, the way I imagine it is that it's like a table, right? And we've got all these linear time lines. I'm going to draw a picture. All right, I've got this big table, okay? And you've got time lines all here. So this might be, you know, the BC, before Christ, blah, 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 down here. This might be right now. Here's the future. And, you know, we sort of drop in and out, and we stand out here. And so when we reincarnate, we're not necessarily going to go immediately where our previous life was. We might go backwards. Or really far forwards and then come backwards again. So I don't think we're constrained to our version of time in terms of our soul. We might go back much further, we might go back forward, jump all over the place. That's how I see it. And almost like once we're on the spiritual plane, we are outside of those constructs of time. We can sort of view it all. And that also links into how I believe our spirit guides or our ancestors can give us information about the future, how precognition can come into play, and how, you know, tarot readers and people who work with energy, because energy isn't constrained by time, how they can, you know, pick up on information that, you know, others might not think is possible because it's outside of time. If our ancestors are on the spiritual plane outside of the 3D physical plane, they are going to have, you know, access to viewing this whole table of timelines and go, you know, yes, you've got free will, so if you do this, it's most likely to happen there. And I think, again, that plays into multiple realities and all that fun stuff. So trying not to go on too much of a tangent, bringing myself back to reincarnation. So that's where I think timelines come from. So some people are really obsessed with the future, some are really obsessed with the past. So that's where you might get that affiliation if you've had a couple, you know, in the same century, a couple of lives in the same century, or if you had a particularly good or a particularly traumatic time in one of those as well. Now, the other thing is recurring dreams or dreams that don't relate to your current life. So, for example, if I'm about to go and sit a big test and I have a dream that, you know, I'm drowning, that's probably indicative of the fact that I feel overwhelmed about this big test, right? That's not going to be a past life dream that, oh, I, you know, drowned in a past life. But if you have recurring dreams from childhood, or even if they start at a particular age, so, you know, you turn 23 and you start getting these drowning dreams and it's not related to circumstances in your life, sometimes that can relate to maybe the time or the age of death in a past life. So you died at 23 by drowning, so now your soul has remembered that trauma and, you know, starts to get those dreams. or from a young age, you might be remembering those last traumatic parts of your life, and sort of like reliving them even though they don't really make sense or you don't understand why. So that can be one cause. I know people who have had, dreams of tidal waves and running from tidal waves, and that's not, related to something going on in their life at the time. There's a few other ones that, just seem really out there, or dreams in another language, that sort of thing. The other step 4, I think we're up to, so we've done place, time, recurring dreams. Number 4, that's going to be strange phobias. And this kind of links in as well. So if you hit 23 and suddenly you're terrified of water on your face, and you're getting these dreams of drowning, that could be, a reason why you're getting these anxieties is because your soul's remembering that, and it's sort of bringing it to the forefront. And the best way to work through those is either with a past life regression therapist, someone specialised, or try and do it yourself as well, in, going into that space where you remember before this life, going back to that death moment, and almost like reliving it can bring you closure and realise this is not from this life. This is from another life. I don't need to carry that fear anymore. So those sorts of fears or phobias or strange phobias that, don't really make a lot of sense. If you have a phobia of, getting in the car and going for a drive because you think you're going to die in a car crash, there's a difference between a phobia, a real fear, and, knowing the dangers and being, anyone can die in a car crash, that sort of thing. So there's a bit of a difference there. It's not a very general term of, oh, I have a phobia of, maybe this. Real phobias, I'm talking. Like example, my daughter, she does have a fear of water on her face. It is terrifying to her, and she's been like that since she was very little. So I have my theories, I have my thoughts, but I don't put any of that on her. If she comes to me later when she's a little bit older, with memories or thoughts or anything, great. If she doesn't, fine. That's her journey and she's going to go through that. But if she does come to me, best person in the world to do that, because I'm not going to judge and I'm not going to tell her, don't be stupid. So then the last one is some talents. Now, look, these are not all, you don't have to have all 5 of these. I think we've all had many, many, many lives. Not all of us, but I think a lot of us have. But the key signs, especially when young, are talents. So being really good at speaking another language or knowing another language without knowing it before. So xenoglossy. So that's when you just start speaking. So either you're possessed or you're going to have, a past life there that's bringing that out. So you might have kids that pop out speaking a language that's totally different to their home language and they've not been surrounded by that other one before. Then you've also got other talents. So there was this one, Ian Stevenson he's written a few books, they're fantastic, on his past life children's stories that he's been able to, that sounds like they're made of fiction, but no, his past life investigations into children who have validated their stories. And there was this one child who popped out and he saw something on the TV once, a man playing golf, and he just went, I used to play that. And the parents he got so obsessed with it, they got him all this golf stuff, and he was like 3 and he was an absolute pro. This kid had like the best golfing skills in the world. I'm obviously not a golfer, I don't know any of these terms, but yes, his skill in swing and all of that was phenomenal, especially for his age group. So that tied in with his past life recollections that he was telling his parents. He picked his photo out from a book of old golfers who had passed on. So those sorts of things that have been validated are really intriguing, really interesting to look into if you're interested. So that's just a few ways that you can sort of know or understand. And there are so many studies out there. It's amazing that it's not in the worldwide community that we know about this. So many religions believe in reincarnation, and it's a word that's not really thrown about that much, surprisingly. But these very good, well-researched studies are fantastic to read. I'll pop a few links in the bio. If you liked this, please hit the like and subscribe button, and share it around. Send me a comment. I know this one's a little bit different to my other videos. It's a little bit more out there, and I love that. It's totally me, but I'm unsure how you guys are going to take it. So let me know, please. And as always, I hope you're having a lovely day wherever you are in the world.